going when we live stream, but we'll be able to
Okay.
upload it later.
Okay, you just give me the heads up.
Will do.
Okay. And Brian, we were thinking Brian Berquist was going to join us as well.
Yes, Brian did say he was going to try to join. I think he was also attending the Public Works meeting, so he might be a few minutes late
Okay.
depending on when that adjourns.
Looks like we're live streaming, so we're good to go.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a meeting of the Village of Shorewood Hills Plan Commission. Tonight is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. It is 7:02 p.m. Let's call the meeting to order. Brian, just want to note the meeting, we're in compliance with the open meetings law and proper notice.
Yes, we are.
Thanks so much. Item 3, approval of minutes. Minutes were in your packet from the March 11th, 2025 meeting. Hopefully you had a chance to review those. If so, I'm looking for a motion for acceptance. Craig.
Just, I don't know if it's appropriate for the minutes, but we've missed, we've had two meetings that did not take place. Oh, should that be noted in the minutes, or maybe that's for the next meeting minute, or this meeting's minutes?
Okay, we can make that notation.
One of the other things in those minutes, I wasn't at that meeting, even though it says I was.
You were there in spirit, Jim. That's what I remember.
I was thinking Florida. I think I was in Florida at that time.
Okay, all right. So, Brian, David, we can make that that edit.
Sure, can do.
Yeah, for the March 11th meeting, Jim?
No, or so I thought the minutes we were looking at were the January ones.
No, this is for March 11th.
Oh, okay.
It says that you joined the meeting at 7:08. That's pretty.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Okay, good. All right, we don't have to worry about that then. All right, Mark.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, March 11th, 2025.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jim. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. That motion carries. Item 4, public comments. Are there any public comments this evening? Michael Van Lanningham. Go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Just thumbs up if you can.
You bet.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Michael Van Lanningham, a Harvard Drive resident, and I wanted to voice my concern tonight with several of the changes to the village zoning code before the commission. Many of them, I think, are fair-minded and address the spirit of existing codes, such as the proposed FAR compromises, improvement to public notice policies, the lead time on CSMs, and minor adjustments to the setback exemption. But I'm concerned about both the tone of the document proposing the changes, its call for the changes to be implemented swiftly, and its argument to pause all village development for 3 months during Wisconsin's short construction season. I want to urge the Commission not to rush any restrictive changes without getting community consensus on development, as proposed in the document. I believe eliminating the setback exemption and increasing the R2 minimum lot size are born of frustration of those who do not participate for whatever reason in the public and open process with regard to the Columbia Road CSM. As an aside, I don't know the developer, never met them. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a developer myself. The document for this meeting contends that these new Columbia lots should be unbuildable without clarifying the basis for this statement. Rather, both the Plans Commission and Board of Trustees minutes indicate the lots comply according to the village engineer, with current zoning code as recognized by the legal and political process they went through. My concern is that village government, at the behest of residents lucky enough to live here, will permanently restrict development of land use that opens the village to more families and increases tax levies. The document calls 5,000 square foot lots ultra small, but this is the size much of College Hills was platted for in the 1920s. FAR and lot coverage requirements ensure the landscape is not dominated by oversized homes. I think the setback exemption is something that could be addressed to make sure that, like the village engineer said, homes don't extend all the way to the village right of way. But why were we as a community prioritizing lawns over dwellings and grass over people? The document decries the opacity of several of the CSMs and implies there's a playbook wielded against unsuspecting residents. But these projects have all been publicly noticed through 2 meetings, gone through a vote of the trustees, that any village resident could access agendas for, read the minutes, or attend the meetings. And the projects created homes for more families who attend our local school, offsetting its declining enrollment, support our activities, and pay taxes. And I would also just say in the call to adopt these changes swiftly or put a moratorium in place until some of the more restrictive changes are put in place, it seeks to implement more transparency. But these same changes that might be discussed tonight are going through the same process as the controversial CSMs. A Plans Commission meeting, which the documents for this were posted about 2 days ago, and then a Board of Trustees vote or 3, depending. So is it fair to call the CSMs opaque, but these changes transparent? I might be the only person doing a public comment tonight. Some of the changes are described in the document as free of controversy, and I certainly don't know. I don't know if I'm, a minority view who thinks that a 5,000 square foot lot is plenty to build a house on. So I would just urge, the commission and also the Board of Trustees to try to gather consensus on this issue and make policy from a place of a deliberative process rather than one born of anger over something that occurred that people didn't, I guess, contribute to. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a productive meeting.
Thanks for that, Michael. Are there other public comments this evening? Any other public comments? Okay, why don't we move forward then? Item 5, discussion of draft ordinance changes related to floor area ratio, FAR, zoning, public notification, and the Good Neighbor residential construction policy. I wanted to provide a little background for the meeting, highlight maybe some topics for discussion, maybe some of what we're going to need in terms of requested input and a potential outcome. Again, this is not a formal discussion. This is really informal feedback only. But at the request of Plan Commission member Craig Weinhold, Craig, you did a lot of yeoman's work on this. Appreciate it. A lot of legwork on it. The Plan Commission will review and discuss a draft proposal dated June 2nd, 2025 that outlines potential changes to several village ordinances. The proposal addresses ambiguities in the floor area ratio ordinance, the buildable depth requirement, minimum R2 lot sizes, public notification procedures for certified survey maps, CSMs, and building permits, and the formal status of the village's Good Neighbor policy. The purpose of this agenda item is to introduce the proposed changes and provide an opportunity for questions, clarification, and constructive discussion. No formal action will be taken at this meeting. Topics include clarification of the FAR calculations, including treatment of basement space and garage allowances, allowances for interior remodeling that do not alter the exterior structure, potential removal of the 40-foot buildable depth requirement, and an increase in the minimum R2 lot size, expanding and formalizing public notification requirements for development activity, codifying and clarifying the village's Good Neighbor policy. As I mentioned, some of this, we're hoping that the village engineer, Brian Berquist, or Tim will be able to join us and provide their perspective. We may have to reach out to the village attorney for any legal review and feedback on these topics as well. And of course, any Plan Commission questions, comments, and identification of areas requiring further exploration. Again, this is informal feedback only. The Commission will not take action, but may identify priority areas for continued staff and legal review and determine whether future community engagement is warranted. Brian Berquist, you're just joining there right after the summary, so appreciate that. Welcome. I know you're kind of on double.
Came in with Bob.
What's that?
Came in with Bob
Oh, awesome.
from
So
Public Works.
is Public Works done or
Yes.
thumbs up? Okay. Hey, Bob, welcome. So
Thank you,
Craig-
John.
Yeah, so Craig, with that introduction, background, topic for discussion, requested input and outcomes, do you want to kick this off for commission members?
I can try to. I'm not going to read through the document, but I'd be happy to talk about where it comes from.
Okay.
And kind of maybe what the key points are. And as you said, it's, with any sort of ordinance change with the village, or any attempt, there's always collateral issues, and there's different ordinances that might impact that. And this is, what the attorneys usually go through in recommending changes. But I tried to follow the breadcrumbs wherever they went around the ordinances to try to get what I thought was kind of the answer to some of the issues that have been raised, not just this year, but going back to the start of the floor area ratio in 2006.
What are the odds of that? I live on 28.
I hear some background noise. Maybe somebody could mute. Okay. Going back to 2009, the Plan Commission had identified that our basement rules were already been, developers were doing end runs around the basement rules by putting 12 inches of dirt on the side of the house to remove that floor from the FAR calculation. So part of this is to say, we've had these concerns before. We haven't acted on them before. The floor area ratio for interior remodeling, I know Shabnam has brought it up. We've talked about it 3 times in the last 6 months, and we're no closer to taking any action. No one has proposed anything. So I just, all that plus the Columbia Road public comments from the last Board of Trustees meeting, really got me to think about how can we address this fairly, not in a way that stops development, but stops development that goes against the spirit of what our ordinances are. The very first thing that I wanted to do is see if people's agreed, is see if we all agreed on some basic principles of how the ordinances should be read. And I sent out an exercise. I believe most of you were invited to take part in it. And I found that the majority of people who took the exercise had a different interpretation of the law than our village engineer. And at the minimum, I think our ordinances need to be clear, not just right now in one meeting, but if we were to go forward 20 years and have a whole new slate of people looking and reading that ordinance, they should come to the same conclusion about what it is. And that's not the way it is right now. We definitely have some ambiguities. So I will stop there. Hopefully that's a good introduction of what motivated this. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts.
Brian Berquist, do you want to speak to the basement perimeter adjustment issue, which was, I think, the first proposed change? Just, how you go about your calculation, just kind of educate Plan Commission members, how you approach that.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I'm gonna share a screen and just the spreadsheet that we worked up over the years as some of these questions came up, because as Craig indicated, there are multiple portions of the code that aren't exactly clear on what the framers' intentions were. we generally, I guess if it's okay with the commission, I'm just going to walk you through one example of an entire house. I think I can do it in about 5 minutes or less.
That'd be great, Brett. Thank you.
We will, assuming everybody can see my screen here, we look at what is the lot size. That's taken from the applicant's survey. To be very clear, we do not resurvey the property. The village does require a survey to be submitted. I will redraft the meets and bounds, the legal description there, to confirm that everybody's arithmetic is good. Then we have some formulas here that go through the village's FAR. Depending on lot size, there are different modification factors that get applied. We also check for maximum allowable lot coverage, just for the Plan Commission's reference. Your code defines lot coverage as principal and accessory structures. It specifically does not include driveways, patios, sidewalks, those kinds of things. On the basement side of things, there is language that includes the prorated square footage of basements when more than one exterior wall is exposed. As Craig indicated, that came up early in the ordinance's execution or application, and we just did some scenarios with Plan Commission at that time. What do you think this should be like? How should this get interpreted? And the guidance at that point, which doesn't have to be how this group wants it to be interpreted now, but the guidance at that point was, boy, we really meant if any exposure is counted, we should count it. So that's how we've been applying it to applications, is if there's any exposure on the basement, we would type in how much footage is exposed. Exposed would be daylight at the floor level is how we've been applying it. This particular house doesn't have any exposure, but let's just say it had 500 feet of perimeter and 50 feet of exposure. It would calculate out that 10% of that floor area should be counted. So we measure the floor area like we do the other floors, which per the floor area rate ordinance is to the outside of the external walls. So in basements, that's going to be a thick concrete wall. We go to the outside of that. And that provides then how much of the basement is counted. We do the same exercise for the first floor. There are no exposure parameters for a first floor. And depending on the house, we do the same thing for the second and third floor. Of particular note is this garage allowance. The code provides for, in a separate piece, it provides that the first 500 square feet of garage shall not be counted. It's silent on how to handle that if it's in the basement. So you'll see that if I put the garage in the basement, it provides a negative 135 square foot amount of floor area. That was, it's another tricky one to determine. When Carl and I first encountered our first basement garage, we chatted it over with the attorney at the time, and the thought was, because the clause in the code does not say that the garage 500-foot allowance should be prorated, that every home would be afforded 500 square feet. I chatted a little bit with Craig over the last few weeks on it, and certainly an interpretation would be no. You could never have negative square feet in a basement. But so you're aware how the village has been interpreting that is, in fact, that you could have negative square feet if the arithmetic worked out that way. And then over in these boxes over here, we simply add everything up, and quite literally, if they're off by a square foot, the plan is rejected and they have to refigure something and resubmit. We do the same checks for setbacks and the similar checks for the lot coverage. So that's how we currently interpret and apply those portions of the code. Certainly, no pride of authorship on this method, and we can adjust as the village sees fit, or if there are changes to the ordinance. Obviously, that's a policy call for the village. So that's a quick tour of how we do a typical house application.
Thanks for that, Brian. Shabnam, I see your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I just had a question
Yeah.
because I guess I'm trying to figure out if this is a loophole. So the garage allowance of 500 square feet, it would be deducted. It sounds like it's the same whether it's horizontal to the house or in the basement. So you would have you would just have 500 square foot reduced from the first floor if you entered it on your spreadsheet under the first floor. I don't see how it's a loophole, because all it does when the garage is in the basement is reduce the size of somebody's basement. The total square footage, whether you plus or minus here, plus minus there, is going to be the same. Everybody gets a 500 square foot garage allowance. I guess I don't understand why it's a loophole. It's negative because you're doing the math earlier in the calculation, but if you just did it later or just at the very end said 500 square foot deduction, it's not a negative. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
That's how I wouldn't call it a loophole necessarily either, because it's how the code's been read. The reason that the 500 has been applied to date, in the way it has been applied, is that at staff level we read it, me, Carl, and the attorney, and just thought, well, if the code says every home is allowed up to a 500 square foot allowance, then it would come off the top. It would not necessarily be prorated like a basement would. But there's more attorneys on the call and I'm certainly not one. So I'm happy to modify as the group sees fit. But that's how it's been applied for the last 15, 16 years.
Craig Weinhold.
Brian, if a garage was built that was on the first floor that was only 250 square feet, would that also give them a minus 250 square foot credit because they didn't use the full 500 square foot?
They would get credit for the first 500 square feet. So if it was 250, they'd get 250 credit. If it was 499, they'd get 499 credit. If it was a 501 square foot, they'd get the 500.
So in the case where they're not using the full 500 square feet, it's not like they get the extra. And I think, Shabnam, that's kind of what you were getting at. Is it just like adding 500 square feet to the total? And it's not. And if the garage is in the basement, it doesn't count as a 500 square foot garage. It gets counted as some sort of percentage. But again, that's the order. I called it a loophole. Maybe that is a mistake to call it that. It's the method that's been used, but it's clear that developers are using that. They're setting the garages down anywhere from 2 to 6 feet or 8 feet or a full story below what's kind of considered ground level to count it as a basement so that they can increase the size of the above ground structure. Which, again, going back to intent in 2006, it seemed to me that that went against the intent of the people who came up with the FAR in the first place. And with the exercise, I kind of showed that most or the majority of people, would also see that. They would also not have gone negative with a basement garage.
So to clarify, Craig, so if there was a 250 square foot garage in the basement, do you still get the 500 square foot deduction, Brian? No. So even if it's 250 in the basement, it's still 250. Okay.
Further question on that topic. Mark.
Yeah, so maybe we could just take this back to first principles, which, as Craig articulated in his draft, saying the goal of FAR is to restrict large above ground structures. I agree with that. Okay, hopefully we all can sort of agree with that's what we're attempting to do, what we're attempting to accomplish here. So it seems to me that if you have structures that are below grade, then I don't see that they should enter into any calculation at all. They're below grade. Who cares, right? So then it just becomes an issue of, okay, so we just have to deal with the garage in the context of it's above ground. And the notion was that people should be able to get some additional credit for having their garage above ground as 500 square feet, if you will. So I'm just wondering whether the way this should be modified is basically to say, if structures are below ground, ignore them. If they're above ground, then FAR comes into play. And if they have a garage above ground, then they get some amount of credit for that. And we just go from there. I think it's really important, as Craig said, we need to make it clear. And I would also add to that, we need to make it simple. Okay, we shouldn't make this too hard for people to have to run a lot of math if we can avoid it to get this done. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. What can be done to make this clear? What can be done to make it simple? And what can be done in the spirit of which FAR was enacted? And so that's my view at the moment.
Thanks for that, Mark. Tessa.
Is the confusion stemming from whether that deduction is done before or after that percentage calculation of the basement floor ratio? Because from the spreadsheet that you showed, it looks like that reduction isn't done until after that percentage. So it wouldn't factor into that basement formula. So that's why it doesn't matter whether it's in the basement or the first floor. So maybe that's where that loophole confusion is coming. If it was within the calculation of the percentage of square foot of the basement, then yes, it would make a bigger difference to the end square footage that we're getting, but maybe I'm misinterpreting that.
Can I answer that, John?
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
So yeah, and that gets really to the heart of it, is the order that it is that the math is done in. And if if you do it's the analogy I would use is if you have a $500 coupon and you go to a store and the store has a basement, a bargain basement, 80% off everything in the bargain basement, and you go to the bargain basement and you find something that costs $510. And so at the checkout, do they take 80% off the $510? And then you pull out your $500 coupon, and then they hand you, I don't know, $400 cash plus whatever object to get you out of the store. Now, if that $500 coupon is not a coupon, if it's a gift certificate, if it had some value, then I could see that you would be able to walk away with something of value for that gift certificate. But in this case, it's sort of a credit or just a grace amount for the garage. And if you don't use it all, you don't get it all. If you put a 250 square foot garage in, you don't get an extra 250 square feet, from that 500 square foot credit to use towards your house. You just lose it. So I would interpret the 500 square foot thing as a coupon and not a gift certificate. It's not a guarantee of 500 free square feet of your house. But
Other thoughts on this topic?
I'd like to ask Brian if he has some part, he's used this more than any of us. Is there
Right.
some parts of this that you see that needs to be improved?
Good question.
From an engineer standpoint, we would love a simple zoning code and have yet to encounter one. So we've come in front of plan a couple times, and we've chatted with the attorney a couple times over the years. That clarification on one wall versus or more than one wall, that if the intention is any exposure, it would be great to clear that up. If on the other hand, the intention is that anything that's buried should be ignored, that'd be great. There are a couple definitions of buried. Subterranean is not always subterranean. And just as an example, Craig, you had called out a couple other homes in the village that might have attempted to use this to their advantage. The 3419 Crestwood example, that was counted as a first floor garage because of the way that the plans were presented.
Good, thank you. I'll correct that on
However, the one on Edgehill Drive was considered a basement garage. Absolutely. And then that definition of what exposure is also tricky, because right now the 10 inches of dirt would count as buried. A buried wall, 10 inches of dirt. So some clarification there would be super helpful. The attic, without getting too detailed on the other situations that are going on right now, the attic is a tricky one as well. What is an attic? How to define that would be helpful.
Yeah, we're gonna transition to the interior modeling next, but Brian, I wanted to ask you, are you doing FAR for other communities? Do you run calculations for other communities? Is this kind of a unique Village of Sherwood Hills phenomenon?
This is the only one we provide support in, is in Sherwood Hills. Of the places we work, we generally work in smaller communities. I understand Madison has a FAR, but it's a different definition. Part of the reason we do help out is Carl asked us to, because the math was just a little intense.
Yeah.
So yours is the most specific one that we work with, but there was a lot of thought that went into writing that ordinance, I presume.
Yeah, and we've had some testimony on that in the past. Craig, you have your hand up. Did you have another question? Comment?
Brian, in terms of calculating the basement exposure percentage, you have the building plans, and you want to do it all from that. You obviously don't want to go visit the site. That's a fail. So you have to do it from the plans. How can we use language that gets a basement where it includes terms like natural grade as opposed to artificial landscaping, and maybe like the midpoint of the wall? So if that basement, if it's a 7.5 foot basement, how can we go to 3.75 feet and say, hey, wherever that is above the natural grade, it counts as exposure, and if it's below the natural grade, then it counts as subterranean. Is that something that the building plans have enough detail I don't want to make it more
For
complicated.
sure.
But if that's
Yeah,
something that could be done,
that was actually kicked around in one of the other discussions. I don't know the dates on it, but at plan when we were trying to determine what does exposed mean, was kicking around either some fraction, and that's I shouldn't be telling you what you all think is exposed. Maybe the straw poll is is a quarter of the clear height. We had that on the plans, a half the clear height, a third of the clear height, whatever you all. What your knee-jerk reaction would probably be a good start. But for sure, that's definitely I can pull that off any house plan set very easy.
and then the natural grade being the operable thing. If somebody starts moving dirt around and creates an unnatural grade to bury parts of the basement, you can tell that from the slope of the hill and so forth, or you can require that in the plans.
The village has a very robust topographical survey requirement. Also one of the most intense that we work with. And that's mostly relative to your roof height definition, which is also very intricate. So we have all that information as part of any application.
Gotcha. Well, then for the benefit of this discussion, the basement, the ordinance changes that talk about the percentage of the total basement floor area and this percentage, I would say should be the midpoint of the basement wall against the natural grade of the land that's being built in, and keep the percentage otherwise the same way. I could see getting rid of all the basement, but we have so many hills that most basements have a little bit of exposure, and people take advantage of it, and rightfully so. So I don't think we can just ignore or write off the basement in all cases. So,
Job done.
This house that is being built on Sweetbriar, what is what was there for? What did it calculate out to be? Does anybody know?
Brian would know.
I do. It is under appeal right now, just so everyone's aware of that. And I've been advised by the attorney to not get too detailed into it, but we did review it, so let me pull it up here.
And that may be a good segue to the next issue too, John.
The interior remodeling exceptions.
Oh, no, sorry, that's a separate one.
Yeah.
That's not it. Anybody? Are you able to see that?
Yeah, that's Crestwood.
I'm looking at 12. Hold on, I shared the wrong spreadsheet. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, before we move to the next topic on this, I think it would be good if the Plan Commission could give some direction to the Bryans as to how we want to pursue this particular topic. It sounds to me like the issue really is when is a basement and below ground, and when is a basement above ground? And when it's above ground, then obviously it needs to count somehow in the calculation, and when it's below, it doesn't. So I'm wondering whether we want to give some direction to the Bryans about coming up with some definition of what is below ground and what is above ground, so that we could clarify that matter at our next time we revisit this subject.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. Go ahead, Brian Berquist.
So this is 1202 Sweetbriar. That's the one on the corner. That's the smallest parcel. It does have, as we reviewed the plans, a basement. The perimeter is 149 feet. Hopefully you can see these highlighted cells. Their exposure is the garage, the front of the garage door. That results in that 13.1% figure. When applied to the whole floor area and incorporating the first 500 square feet of the garage, that does result in
Brian,
a
I
negative
hate to
number.
interrupt you on this, but I think you were right the first time when you said this issue is on appeal. And I think we should
Kinda.
steer clear of it entirely myself.
Okay.
Well, I was the one who asked the question.
Yeah, Shona.
So I think I just was trying to figure out, is this a 4,000, 5,000 square foot house? What is it? It's 2,000. It's like 2,100. And it is large for the size of the lot, but is it a McMansion that FAR is trying to prohibit? I wouldn't think that a 2,000 square foot house, I wouldn't call it a McMansion. So maybe, I understand the purpose of FAR. We don't want these McMansions taking over the neighborhood. At the same time, I think about when we're having this discussion, like what it's like to have small kids in a house. Is there anybody in this group that is on the market looking for more space? And that our properties are vastly different in size. You've got very small parcels with extremely large parcels. The FAR ordinance has certainly prohibited larger homes, but I think making more changes to it that would make it more restrictive is going to be more burdensome to the family on the smaller lot. So I have a basement that is a little bit above grade, and I always get nervous trying to figure out, I need a bigger house. And how will this basement be included in a renovation? And I would argue that basements should not be included because it's not included for the bank assessment. So according to the bank, I have a two-bedroom house with 1,200 square feet, but according to the village ordinances, I have a 4-bedroom house with 2,000 square feet, although 1,000 of that square foot is in the basement and unusable. So to make these ordinances more restrictive at a time when, people are locked in low interest rates, it's impossible to buy a larger house. You're going to be doing some kind of a renovation. The houses that are in Shorewood, most of them don't use space well. So you're trying to fit more rooms in a house. And so I would argue that if a basement is not livable space for a mortgage and it's not considered livable space in other municipalities, why are we like forcing that square footage to constitute livable space if other municipalities don't and the bank doesn't consider it? And the same with the attic. Why not take the attic out of the equation for FAR, then trying to make an exception for remodeling? I don't know if anybody else some people might have ginormous houses and these issues don't affect them. But for the people on the smaller lots, I'm here to be a little cheerleader.
Tessa, you have a reaction or question?
Yeah, just from the alternative perspective and kind of in line with what Michael said in his public comment is the young families that are trying to move into Shorewood, we can't afford these houses. And every expansion that is made on these houses just continues to make it that young families cannot move into this neighborhood. Even the most reasonably sized houses that are going for sale in Shorewood right now are over $1 million. Like, that is insane to me. And we're talking about wanting to make houses bigger. Our enrollment in Shorewood School is going down because those of us with young families can't afford to live here. And I was very lucky to get a small home in this neighborhood at a time when I could afford it, but I could never I could expand based on the floor area ratio. I could expand by quite a bit in my home, but I could never afford another house in this neighborhood if I wanted to move to a bigger house. So I don't know, just another perspective to put out there.
I just want to, I agree with Tessa that like I couldn't buy a house in Shorewood right now, impossible. But are we harming the family that's going to buy this house? Or are we trying to impact the contractor? Because the developers, it doesn't affect them. It's the family that's going to live there that's affected by our decisions. I think the builder makes their money one way or the other.
Well, let's we've got some more topics to talk about. Mark, you made the point about providing some guidance. Do you want to go issue by issue here, or do we want to cover everything and then kind of give a summary directive?
My preference would be do it issue by issue because for the most part, the issues are fairly different. And instead of kind of getting the end and trying to go back and revisit all the issues we discussed, I'd prefer to, I mean, we don't have to give Brian's any guidance on this, and we can just pick up where we left off, but I think it would be better if someone has a theory of the case to give Brian's some guidance as to how to pursue that.
But the commission's not providing that direction tonight.
We're just talking.
Yeah, was it Craig first and then Shabnam?
It is a suggestion as we move forward, if we could skip the interior remodeling and move to the 40-foot buildable depth, because I think that's more relevant to the discussion we've been having. We can circle back to the interior remodeling afterwards.
Okay. I was just going by sequence. Shabnam?
I agree. I think we could actually have more agreement there, but maybe for the time being, with the little bit of vagueness, it would allow the Bryans to pass judgments. I think that sometimes there are families where it's a room in the backyard that nobody's going to notice and the neighbors are all okay with. And so the openness to the interpretation allows them to approve a permit that they otherwise couldn't. So maybe we don't have to solve this right now. Maybe there's nothing to solve. It could come up on a case by case. Let's just move on. Doesn't seem like.
I just had one more comment, and I do think that it makes more sense to resolve some of the ambiguity in the ordinance than change the entire ordinance. I think that's where our hesitation has been, is changing the calculation. That was very thought out, changing the ordinance. But as Craig pointed out, there is some openness for interpretation, and maybe just clarifying that would fix a lot of these issues.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we talk about the 40-foot buildable depth? Craig, you talked about eliminating it. And you also talked about increasing R2 minimum lot size. Did you want to speak to it anymore, or?
Sure. Yeah, I can briefly go over it. So the situation under appeal is a novel one. It's the first time that the village engineer Brian has seen a property, violate the ordinance about the 40-foot buildable depth. And if you go read the rule, it basically guarantees that every lot has a 40-foot buildable depth. And if it can't satisfy that, the front yard setback can decrease to 0 to make that happen, which means the building could abut the power poles or the sidewalk or the street or whatever the village right of way is. Usually the actual road that you see, the village right of way usually goes, 5 or 10 feet, away from that. So it's not like there's no front yard. But you kind of wonder where this 40-foot buildable depth, came from originally. Also, the same language that talks about it talks about a 70-foot buildable width, but it refers to the day the ordinance is adopted. You know, as properties, as of the day this is adopted, the 70-foot buildable width is also guaranteed. And I don't know when that was adopted. No one knows when that was adopted. I mean, you have to go through the, figure out who wrote it. So there are these two rules that both basically say, let's set aside all the front setback rules. So we have a lot of other ordinance language that says, if you've got, maybe 10 other properties on your block and they all have a setback of so much, you're supposed to have a conforming setback. We've got all sorts of laws, rules about that. But then we set them aside in this case for these small lots that are, again, should be unbuildable, or at least the one under appeal probably should have been unbuildable because it could not be built without invoking that 40-foot thing to put the house so close, and so it's going to be set so much closer to the road than all the other houses on the block. It's going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Right. I don't want to have a detailed discussion on Sweetbriar. But Brian, do you want to just speak to kind of Brian Berquist, can I put you on the spot? And can you speak to the history? Where did this come from? Is it something you've seen before? Do you recommend that we, address the potential ambiguity? Just a little context without talking about specific parcels. Any thoughts, just from your standpoint, your understanding of the code?
The village's setbacks are also unique from what we've seen, which is a common theme of your zoning code. It seems to have been very specific, with something very specific in mind. That 40-foot depth, it well predates my involvement, so 2007, way before then. No one had ever tried it. This was, we've rarely, if ever, seen it prior to this year. As an aside, over on Crestwood, some of you may remember those two newish homes that were built there. There is a clause that on a separate page of your code that refers to the average setback of the remaining homes on the rest of that side of the block until the next cross street. Even something like that is not easy math. I know it sounds crazy, but the property records in a community like Shorewood Hills with your age and the geometry of your street, so they're not gridded off at all. Very, very, very good surveyors have been hired by many of the residents to determine where their land actually is, the piece of real estate they own in space. And short of surveying the entire plat, resolving all the no man's lands and all the overlapping parcels, of which there are plenty, a decent engineer could get you within 5 feet. A really good surveyor could get you within a couple feet. But when things get down to this precision that is generally desired and expected in Shorewood Hills, it's oddly more difficult than you think to make for the code to make statements like the rest of the block, things like that. So those are tricky because they're obviously put there for a reason, but when they are applied, they often come from left field, and a modern person says, "What the hell is this all about? What does that even mean? Why is it?" And it does make it tricky for residents who are used to seeing, the majority of your code applied to the majority of homes. But when there are those unique one-offs, it's tricky for the residents, and don't worry about me. It makes it harder for the reviewers, but it's there. So unless there's a lot of passion about either of those, the 40-foot minimum width or the average setback of the rest of the block, those are, any of those kind of one-off comments make it trickier for typical residents to know what to expect, I'd suggest.
Questions on that? Thoughts on that? Craig?
And just that the average of the block, other block of the fronts, I call that the conformance clause in my writing. And I've read it so many times, I still can't figure out how it would ever be interpreted. It's absolutely a crazy thing. But yes, the person who wrote it had a very clear idea that they did not want houses to stick forward from other houses on the block relative to the street. But Brian just did a great job of explaining why it's really hard to write that into an ordinance.
Shabnam?
I don't know about like removing the 40-foot depth or not. I feel like I don't know enough about it, but the idea that you could have a 0-foot setback just seems like it could be a safety hazard. I mean, the 3 feet setback, you could have a kid running out from behind a house or running after a ball, and a driver has no way of knowing or anticipating. So you could even have icy roads and somebody loses control of a car and gets into somebody's better on the lawn than into the house. So there should be like a minimum 10 feet, not for lawn, like as Michael Van Landingham mentioned, not for the lawn, but just for the safety of pedestrians, streets, driving, walking, utilities.
Okay. Berquist?
Yeah, to that end, that was one thing that the former attorney indicated is because the current code just says in no case shall this be less than 40. If you simply added and the front setback shall never go less than X, then that would fill a need or a desired need, if I may be so bold to see what people are talking about, is just add that, well, the front setback of a minimum of pick a distance is the governing character, the governing dimension here. Because as it reads right now, it is that 40.
So maybe it's a house in a small lot that could have had 40-foot depth, but needed to get, a 15-foot setback, and maybe that's what it's trying to allow for. So do we remove the 40-foot entirely, or can you just add minimum 10-foot setback?
Totally, it's a village call. I think you could add the setback and how short I think the group is saying.
Brian Mooney, were you going to say something? And then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, thanks, John. The point I was just going to add, I just want people to be remembering to, within the most recent adopted village strategic plan, the village residents and the voice support was for a diversity of different housing at different price points and different densities. I again, just on this topic, I just want people to be mindful of the fact that if we start removing minimums, you could have scenarios occur where we're talking about and having voice displeasure about projects coming forward with tiny homes and other things that are not characteristic of the community on the opposite side of what the FAR was created to basically prevent. Again, not necessarily the intent of what we're talking about tonight, but there could be a scenario that is facing residents in the future where they feel that is not befitting of the neighborhood, but that is also something that, we might unknowingly walk into as part of this overall discussion.
The law of unintended consequences. Mark?
Yeah, I would just add along those lines is that the commission is also considering ADUs. And ADUs are going to be small structures. And sort of philosophically, I think I mean, that is something in our comprehensive plan that we will at least consider the possibility of ADUs. People want affordable housing and so on. So the fact that somebody is restricted to build just within that 40 feet and doesn't get to claw into the setback, I don't know that that troubles me that much, because that's kind of the spirit of where I thought we were moving with respect to the comprehensive plan and ADUs, is that there would be conceivably smaller structures on lots. But I would agree with Brian Berkowitz' suggestion that, we leave the 40-foot minimum in, but just say, add an addendum saying, but the setback can't be less than X. And if people have a problem with that, then they can seek a variance. And that's what the process is. So again, in the spirit of keeping this simple, I would say you either eliminate the 40-foot minimum, or you put the 40-foot minimum in, but with the addendum with a minimum front setback, and go that way.
Thanks, Mark. That's helpful. Shabnam, I'm going to go to Kara since she's hasn't had an opportunity yet. Kara, welcome.
Thanks, John. Just a little history question, and I'm sorry if this was stated at the beginning of the meeting, but I don't think we were talking about this. So I was just curious if there already is a parcel, one of these smaller parcels that has that kind of zero setback geometry, because it would just kind of give us a sense of what we would be talking about. So that's my first question. And then I just had a comment, which is that I appreciate that we are talking about, referring back to the principle of housing in the village and creating more options for people to affordably settle here.
Thanks, Kara. Brian, did you want to answer that real quick? Brian Berkowitz? Is that why your hand was up?
About a house that has Kara's question about a house that has a similar very small setback is actually coincidentally on Columbia Road, just east of Sweetbriar. As I understand it, it's one of the original homes. It's 2804. And it's pretty dang close. It's about 28 feet from front porch to roadway.
Mhm.
And as Craig indicated, the right of way itself is actually back here in the stairs. And again, this was a very, very old home.
Right.
But it just to get you some visual massing, that's about what you're looking at. 280, no, it says 2803, but right on that corner. That's all I have.
That's helpful. Shabnam, I think you were next in the queue, and then we'll go to Craig.
Well, I was Googling to figure out if we're trying to promote density, ADUs, different kind of accessory dwelling units, what minimum change could we put in place so that the setback is not 0? And it seems like 10 foot. Could we all agree on 10 foot? Could anybody see a situation where you would want a setback of 10 foot? We could always do more, but
No, I think it's a good point. I'm trying to get back to Mark Lederer's idea of talking about this. I mean, the Bryans, I'd like to work with them and come back with a proposal on some of these items, based on this discussion, and then have a really focused discussion on each issue with a decision point or a recommendation point. So 10 feet may be a good number. I would say to commission members, to weigh in with Brian Mooney, so we can kind of collect kind of desirables on this, and then we come back with maybe a couple choices. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but it would be nice to have something specific. Once we talk more with our engineer, once we talk a little bit more with the attorney, what a recommendation would look like, and then in our quasi judicial framework, we would review, we would discuss, and we'd recommend. So if that works for the Bryans, then that works for me, and I think that will address, Mark's concern. Craig, you have your hand up.
I looked at some other narrow lots. And Brian, maybe you can pull it up. I think 3410 Viburnum is also probably got about a 10-foot front yard setback, maybe 12-foot. It's squashed in there between Crestwood and Viburnum, so it's also not fully buildable. There's another similar lot on Oxford, Camille's house. And in that case, they took it out of the backyard setback. So the front yard looks fine, but the backyard is smaller than needed, or than zoning calls for. So there are definitely examples of houses that are encroaching the front yard, that are not 25-foot front yard setbacks.
So Brian Berquist, are those just non-conforming then?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said 3410, Craig?
Yeah, it's the one to the right where the garage is very prominent.
And the Google car was not having a good day that day.
Yeah, you have to go. Yes, it's got the for sale sign on it. There you go. So you can see how the garage is very close to the street. The house is actually set back fairly far, but there's in addition to the 40-foot setback, there's the other language about corner lots in 50-foot or 70-foot width. And I don't think this is the right forum to talk about that, but Brian, I'd love to get your thoughts on how that could be simplified also, because it's a huge mouthful and makes no sense. It talks about distinct ownership and lots at record of the time the ordinance is adopted is actually written into the ordinance. So that would be something to also streamline.
Mark?
Yeah, so just to clarify here, so if the ordinance was revised, and let's just say the 40-foot exception disappeared, it was just gone entirely, these non-conforming lots would all be grandfathered, I assume. And so the question I have is, what lots would actually be now restricted by the ordinance change? To what lots would it apply?
Go ahead, Craig. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the three in question that we're not supposed to talk about, were all created out of thin air, and they all abuse this ordinance. They're the first ones. But if you look around the village, there's other probable lots that you could also find 5,000 square foot. There's a corner of, I think, Sunset and Blackhawk, and I was kind of pacing that off the other night, and it looked like it was big enough that you could squish a house in there, and with that 40-foot requirement, you'd have to abuse it. So there's definitely other places in the village where this will happen. Columbia isn't the only. That's the first one that we've seen where this is happening to, but there will be others.
Right. So I'm trying to understand, though, do these property owners, they bought the property, they own it now under an existing set of ordinances. The ordinances now change. Their properties are adversely impacted by the change. are they grandfathered or are they not?
My understanding, Brian, or one of the Brian should answer, but my understanding is that the moment they file the CSM, they're governed by the laws that are in place at that exact moment. Same with building permits. But
Brian Mooney, go ahead.
No, I believe that is correct, what Craig said. I think it's what's on the books at the time of the action that is presented is what the ruling ordinances are.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, it's not at the acceptance or the approval by, for example, the Board of Trustees or something. This is when they actually file the paperwork.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm sure we're going to run all this by the village the village attorney.
100%. I was just going to add that 100% needs to be double checked, but I think that is correct.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to talk about lot sizes for a couple of minutes? 5,000 versus 6,000? Don't we have 5,000 square foot lots in Garden Homes?
Yes, that's a different zoning district. So this is the R2 district specifically.
Okay.
Because
Garden Homes is R2, isn't it?
I think there's an overlay for it.
We've got overlay for smaller side setbacks and a smaller front setback. I seem to remember that, so that porches could project. But I thought the original lots were all around 5,000 square feet. I forgot to check. Brian?
It is R2. The district is R2, but
Yeah.
you're also both correct that there's an overlay
Yeah.
that allows them. The lots there are about 4,200 square feet. They're all a little different, but generally about 4,200 square feet.
Okay.
So
Mark, I see Mark's hand, and then we'll go back to Craig. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I would just kind of repeat my earlier point that this proposed or possible change again runs up against the issue of what's our goal here? What's in our strategic plan? You know, if we raise the minimum for lot sizes, that's making the lots more expensive, right? And so it's going against a philosophy of trying to create more affordable housing, a denser population, and the like. So, I mean, there's no unadulterated good here. You can increase these lot sizes, but there are adverse impacts from that in terms of our goals. So it's the point I'm just trying to make on that.
No, appreciate that, Mark. Back to you, Craig, and then Shabnam.
Yeah, excellent point, Mark. I mean, when these things were first happening in January at the Plan Commission meeting, when that CSM first came up, and we knew there was going to be this issue of the 40-foot setback, I just started doing the math and looking at the lot size. And if you look at the the square footage coverage rule, and you look at a 5,000 square foot lot, well, the coverage is 1250 or something, and you start to look at what's possible. Well, if those lots were all perfectly square or rectangular, no problem. You certainly can fit in while maintaining all the setbacks that we have. But none of the lots that are going to be built anytime soon are going to be square. It's just, except with the exception of tear downs, and we have seen that where you'll see a tear down and a lot will be subdivided into two houses that are perfectly conforming. Looking at the information for lots, I only see 3 lots, two built lots that are under 6,000 square feet. There's a third, but it has a triangular lot next to it, so it actually makes it more like 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. But so there's really only 2 in the village that would be grandfathered in by that change. We should probably check Garden Homes. I could be wrong if that's also R2. We would certainly want to address that. But it seemed like an easy way to say, hey, by requiring 6,000 square feet, we're also requiring dimensions that contain our side setbacks, our rear setback, and our front setback, and our 40-foot buildable depth requirements. Now, if we're changing any of those things, then 5,000 square foot might be a perfectly good lot. But if the numbers stand as they are today, 5,000 square foot is not big enough except in a perfect square or rectangle.
Right, but if we solve the 40-foot depth issue,
yes,
then we don't necessarily need to shrink that to enlarge the size of the lots. So we don't need to fix both. Perhaps we can just fix one.
I completely agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, Mark. Shabnam.
Craig, can you tell me where you got the 6,000 square foot number from?
It just popped into my head as a round number. That was we have 400 R2 houses, and only 3 of them are on lots that are smaller than 6,000 square foot. And one of those, as I said, is not an issue because it's actually got a second lot near it. So there's really only 2 houses that are non-conforming with that. So it seemed like it would be an easy thing to do. Going up to, a higher number would all of a sudden start excluding a lot of houses, and that's not the intent. The intent isn't to make things unbuildable. The intent is to make sure that the base lots that are created are compatible with the zoning code for those lots, the building code. But as Mark said, if we adjust the building code, then 5,000 square feet might become fully buildable again. If we have a 10-foot front yard setback instead of 25 foot, for example.
Well, so I mean, in just speaking to neighbors throughout the last couple of weeks, people have said that this situation that has recently occurred has made them reevaluate. They didn't know that you could just apply for a CSM and the village would have to approve it. And so the concern was for the houses on Sunset and Blackhawk with these ginormous lots, can somebody just buy this, demolish the house, and subdivide it? So maybe that's something we want, maybe that's something we don't want. I'm just wondering if we've thought about the bigger lots and somebody could easily come in, buy it, demolish the house, and divide it into smaller lots. Is that something we're discussing?
So just know that the large lots, those are R1, so those have a 9,000 square foot, but the concept is the same. Yes, some of those lots are, 25,000 square feet. They could divide in, or 28,000 square feet or something. They could divide into 3 separate houses. I use the example of Nancy Hayden's house. That would be one that would be very attractive for a developer to come in, tear down, and put up 2 houses on that same spot. Make a quick buck. So.
So I want to be mindful of time. Usually 9 o'clock is a good stop time for Plan Commission. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So let's keep moving along. Do we want to talk a little bit about the interior remodeling, potential ordinance changes?
And if I could just, I'll be real brief. That was kind of getting to what Shabnam was saying, that if an interior change can be made that doesn't really affect the neighbors, why would it be disputed? If you're taking a dead space in the attic and turning it into a game room, or you're creating a bathroom under this, in the basement, that shouldn't have really an effect. And I guess it mostly affects the attics. And that's where Ryan Berquist was saying there's ambiguity about attics. What is a livable attic, and when does it count, and when does it count? The one thing that the suggestion changes that I had were, to say if this is an existing house, in other words, not a strategy for new construction. If someone is doing new construction and strategizing to take advantage of the attic space, how do we prevent that while still allowing people that have the attics, who are living there, who are neighbors, who have invested in the community, the opportunity to remodel their space? and take advantage of that. That was kind of what the language was trying to get at. But I'm definitely open to suggestions on ways to clarify that or make that more legal. So.
No, Craig, that's helpful. Shabnam, I know you've been very outspoken on this as well. I was just going to ask Brian Berquist, are there any nuances, from your standpoint? Has that been talked about? What was the context of that, previously?
A lot of comments similar to that. And by that I mean, what's the difference if the building envelope doesn't change? How is this
right
contrary to the goals of the ordinance? And I try to, it's all policy decision that's it's up to the village on why that might matter. One thing that we've talked, Carl and I talked about a lot is, a person could build a massive gymnasium, one floor, 35 feet tall, like a Best Buy. They could build a Best Buy, and the floor area ratio does not prohibit that because you only have one floor. You could build a basketball gym, but if you had very short floors, 6-foot ceilings, you would be on the wrong side of the arithmetic. So that's, what to do with an existing attic envelope or an existing basement envelope has been identified, and that I don't have a good answer for why that's not allowed in the current ordinance, but it's not.
But that's something we could bring forth a recommendation on moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
For the commission's consideration.
I'm really out over my skis on this, but if the desire is building mass, a very simple calculation is how many cubic feet of building envelope is above natural grade.
Isn't the person still limited though by the other ordinances we have, like the height restriction? So that it.
Yep. Yeah, you definitely could do that. The height would still stay there, but if the goal is building volume, whether or not you've got 10 inches of dirt over the floor or not, you could convert or allow some ceiling, numerical ceiling of just exposed building envelope volume.
So you could come up, I don't want to speak for you, Brian, because this is where I get in trouble, but so you could come up with a cubic foot above grade number that would be assignable based on lot size?
It would take some doing. You'd have to manipulate the LiDAR data from Dane County that picked up, rooftop lines and that kind of thing. And it just like you used assessor data, which is approximate. The community used assessor data back in 2005 or 6 to generate, this formula here, because that's what was the best data was available. But it does create, you're trying to, I think, trying to address building mass via floor areas.
And what you're saying is we've got some technology available that we didn't have available 20 years ago that may simplify that.
If you were looking to blow the whole thing up, if you just want to do a couple tweaks, you may just want a very equivalent way, similar but different, is just saying if the house has been in existence for X years, anything inside the envelope is.
But we'd be able to address the policy outcome with that approach.
Mm-hmm.
We get the same outcome. It'd be new math, new process, and one that looks like you'd be comfortable with as well.
It would take a lot of the ambiguity out of it, but it is blowing up the whole ordinance, which may not be practical.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Anything else on the interior remodeling? The comments, thoughts?
Hey, John,
Hey, Craig. Yep.
if I could call attention on, I think it's on page 5. There's a section dealing with FAR deficiencies, and this gets into it. And I linked to the Wikipedia entry, and it's worth reading. You know, there's a lot of criticisms, and the big one is that FAR in general, and this is not just Shorewood's FAR, this is, you know, FAR across America has been implemented, you know, using well-intentioned people's ideas of what they should do, but the result is a very poor predictor of physical form. And it's not useful for conserving or enhancing neighborhood character. So anyway, that's a good Wikipedia article to read about. You can certainly look at the FAR ratio for other communities. But I also say that it is imperfect. We shouldn't weaken it without a completely better alternative. And maybe Brian just brought it up, what the completely better alternative is. You know, but we certainly don't want to weaken FAR unnecessarily because of the collateral possibility of damage.
Right. We've had a lot of testimony in terms of the history, you know, what the debate was over the years. Shabnam, did I see your hand go back up?
Well, I'm very glad that Craig brought that up because I think, you know, I obviously approached this plan commission a year ago and I was frustrated because I saw some families getting variances and others not, and I thought they were all equally deserving. And I was very focused in on certain houses and not taking a very holistic approach to FAR. And now looking at it holistically, I really am not sure I understand it that well. Are you regulating density? Are you regulating green space? Are you regulating, like, what are you really regulating? So I think it's and it's hard with our village when there's such extremes. You have very small homes and ginormous homes. I think it's very challenging to have this, but I think if there are going to be changes to the FAR ordinance, something holistic would be preferred over let's just put a Band-Aid on this so this house gets the attic. Let's put a Band-Aid over here so this house can't have a garage. Could we be a little more holistic about it?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is that some of these fixes may be more urgent. And I think that so we run into a timing problem. I mean, I'm very open to looking at a different scheme that accomplishes our purpose, but realistically, I think that will take us a long time to do. And I think there are some issues that we need to address more quickly. So while not saying let's throw out FAR, and while not discounting the possibility of replacing FAR, I think in the interim, we need to do a little patching, and then we have a little more time to consider other alternatives that accomplish our goals.
Thanks, Mark. Craig.
Yeah, on that point, I was thinking an ad hoc committee, you know, would probably be the best thing to look at a full overhaul of it. I'm sure that's probably how FAR came to be in 2006. We probably had a committee that spent some time working with the numbers, working with Brian, you know, to come up with a current thing. And it's probably time to think about that again, but that's a much longer process. I definitely think there's some Band-Aids. I wouldn't even call them Band-Aids. I mean, they're just clarification of what the intent was, getting rid of some of the ambiguities. And that'll at least get us, you know, by us a year or two.
Thanks, Craig. Kara.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just wanted to just bring up the point that I think, you know, as has been mentioned several times, the policy goals behind FAR. At this point, we really don't know what they are, and we are kind of speculating. And so in some ways, we have a little bit of a blank slate where that is concerned. And I'd be concerned about a committee making policy decisions for the village. And so, at some point early in the process, if we're going to be doing the bigger overhaul of FAR, I do think that it needs to be brought up in more of a kind of public, board level way.
Thanks for that, Kara. Shabnam? And then Jim.
Well, Kara's point is well noted, and I agree with her. But if there was a committee that could just get information, like we tried to figure out how many houses abide by the FAR ordinance, but we were kind of guessing and weren't exact about it. If we could see if there is
totally, I think that's like a great use for a committee, is to kind of try to do some of that technical legwork and gather historical information and number crunch and such to inform the policymakers.
That would be great. And if they could see what other municipalities do, give us some new information would be great.
Exactly,
Jim,
that too.
Okay, Jim Etvensack, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, if you really want, I've been on the commission quite a while, but if you want to know how we started, if you know where Rocky lives on Tally Ho, look up behind his house and you'll see 2 or 3 houses built on topping that are huge. And those houses were small before the FAR. And the FAR came into existence because those were 3 of the houses that everybody said that should never happen here in Shorewood again. And that was one of the reasons that we developed this. So just take a look at them. You'll see how huge they are in comparison to the other things. And that was the thing we were trying to avoid happening all over Shorewood.
Keep the good and maybe address some of the potential ambiguities. I'm hearing that a lot tonight. Okay.
Can I ask a question? And
Yeah.
I will stop talking if I'm taking up too much.
No.
But if I could ask Jim, is it the appearance of the house? Because sometimes you look at the houses on Lake Mendota Drive that from the lake are enormous. But if you look at it from the street, it looks like a little cottage and nobody, is it the size of the house that we want to regulate, or the way it looks to neighbors?
Well, generally it's the size of the house, because no matter if it's really big, everybody knows it's big. So that was the intent, was to keep from having those spread throughout the village. Because there are people who wanted to do that. This guy, those 3 houses were built by a guy who said, my retirement is coming from what I'm rebuilding these houses. It was just a speculator, total speculator doing that. So it was sort of a pressure. That's not what we wanted to have happen all over Shorewood.
Yeah, we've had a lot of testimony on this as well from previous meetings. So can we transition here a little bit on Craig? I think you talked about expanding and formalizing public notification requirements for development activity. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I'll briefly go through that. And this gets to the comments of Michael early on about, public, the CSM was in the public sphere. The one under appeal now, was given the 5 days notice before the Plan Commission meeting, and then 1 week before the board. So there were 12 days in there where if somebody was paying attention to the meeting notices, or if they walked over to Four Corners and looked at the posted papers on the little shelter there, they might have gotten some inkling that this was going on. And that's kind of a little, it seems a little a stretch that people are paying that much attention. The only people paying that close attention to the business that we're doing are probably the developers, frankly. So there's a slate of changes that I'd recommended, and it's for a number of things. The first one is about legal announcements, declaring that putting them on the internet and using a notification system is a suitable replacement for posting them at Four Corners and outside the old firehouse, which is what our current law says. And the state is way ahead of us. The state has already said internet is fine for legal announcements. We should just change our ordinance to say, yeah, internet is good. And Nixle alerts or some equivalent that says, hey, this business is before us, or this legal announcement or whatever, some way to notify people that something new has happened is also good. The other thing is that the CSMs in particular, those are only required 5 days before Plan Commission, and Plan Commission is 1 week before the board. And as the public comments to the board at the last Board of Trustees meeting, people who are redoing a bathroom in their house have to do more public engagement than some of these full construction projects. I understand there's a speed for development, but trying to but get something through in 12 days is really trying to fly under the radar. So I propose, instead of being 5 days before the Plan Commission, have them do 2 weeks. They have 2 weeks, and then once the CSM is proposed, it becomes a legal announcement, which gets announced. And that gives anybody in the village 3 weeks, basically, to learn about and object to. The thinking is that it's better to have people object before it's approved than to wait for it to be approved and then have the appeal process, which is costly and fractious for the community. It's much better to have things be in the open probably beforehand. So the CSM requirement, change it from 5 days to 2 weeks. Same thing on the building permit, which already has a window. Just make sure that it's announced. So if a building permit that falls under the good neighbor requirement, the good neighbor requirement says if it's a tear down, or if it's a new construction, or if it's more than 350 square feet, then it falls under the good neighbor clause. And in those cases, that would require a legal notice or some sort of notification, so that people who are interested, especially the neighbors, would get to know that this is taking place. Finally, that good neighbor policy, I know we have it posted, but I can't find any ordinance that actually calls for it. So it seems to be just kind of a voluntary policy. The link, you can find it at the building permit part of our website, which is, I love our new website, by the way. But I think we should put the good neighbor policy into ordinance just to clarify that someone has to follow it, that it's not an optional thing. So those are the kind of the changes. They're all about this public announcement, slightly slowing down the CSM, not changing the building permits at all, except to make sure that they're announced if they are large. And that's it.
Reactions to those ideas. Mark.
Yeah, I think some of those are really good ideas, but I also think that we're talking about putting things in ordinance, and we all know that that means we're going to have to make a recommendation to the board. The board's going to have to do 3 readings, da-da-da-da-da-da. So I do believe sunshine is the best disinfectant, but I think we can accomplish that outside the ordinances merely as the staff says, okay, somebody files a building permit, somebody files a CSM. Well, maybe we have a dedicated web page that's, these are changes, proposed changes to zoning, to building, whatever. And so that the residents are just directed, hey, if, you don't have to hunt and try to find these things. You can just go to this web page and you can see what's been filed. And so the clock will begin the moment that piece of paper hits Brian's desk, and we just go from there. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't also incorporate some of these things in law, but I'm saying we shouldn't limit ourselves to that and be forced to delay making changes that would increase transparency and give people more time to react to these proposed changes.
Thanks for that, Mark. That's helpful. Brian Mooney, any reaction? I mean, we're always sensitive about overburdening staff, but could we have kind of a catch-all where it's kind of a revolving issue or permits, or why don't I'll stop talking. Why don't you react?
No. I mean, there may be some avenues that can be explored on that. I mean, and since there are different contract or consultants involved for different parts of the building permit process. I mean, there might be a website or something that our um, building permit issuer GEC currently has that already exists that I'm just not aware of at this particular moment. But that we can spend a little bit more time. That was the whole point of having this as a discussion topic tonight, so we can, think about some of these things and do some additional research and bring some feedback back. So I can definitely do some due diligence in asking on that front. What I did want to say though, I didn't have an opportunity to get this included, but I did have Julie Fitzgerald, our village clerk, look into a few of the aspects of the recommended changes that Craig put forth, just from a clerk and from a notice standpoint, and some of the considerations that she might have from that standpoint, from the notice standpoint, from incurring additional costs related to some of the publication of notices. So what I think, instead of going line by line through that, I think the best course of action, given the time right now, might be to have that included in a summary form for the next meeting's discussion, and give you an opportunity to read through it a little bit in advance as well. But yeah, she has some very good points, some things that are considerations, but there are absolutely staff ability considerations and availability, I should say, that we do need to talk through as well, because some of the changes will absolutely add additional workloads to what's currently very busy staff environment in the admin office right now. So we can surely discuss that going forward.
Any other thoughts, Shabna?
So I definitely agree that notice to neighbors is so important. How to notify neighbors could, as an alternative solution, could we just require that there's a public hearing? It seems like it's optional to have a public hearing, but we could just require that. I worry about creating an ordinance and then now you've got more liability. What if a building permit is approved and it shouldn't? Now is the village at risk? Because either side, you're kind of stuck between two. But requiring a public hearing and notifying the surrounding neighbors, could that also meet the goal of notifying neighbors? Because I think I also might not know to go to a website. I'm more likely to react if I got something in the mail and you came to me than for me to go and figure out what's going on, which is what happened here.
I think to speak to that, and what a modification of the ordinance could be, would just be to remove the component to the, like, for case in point example of the CSM process, it removed the language that says you may notify to you shall notify, and that codification of that change in and of itself will trigger the public hearing for future situations like this to arise, and how we would be handling that. So some of those are simpler changes. But again, the thing we have to keep in mind is that most CSMs, at least I'm Brian Berquist might be able to speak to this better than I, but most CSMs don't traditionally involve a whole heck of a lot of public debate and or feelings leading one to say I do not approve of the change. And there is an incurred cost that's going to be involved with having to send public notice letters to all surrounding radius parcels. That's not currently, I wouldn't say it's an everyday thing, but it does happen on occasion, and those are things that we would have to modify our village budget accordingly to add postage and costs associated with that. So those are just little considerations that we need to, keep in mind if we're going to make changes like that going forward. But I think that's an easy starting point.
Can you make the applicant pay those fees? Have them cover it. Put it on them. I do USCIS work. They make us do all the work, including their work. Just make the applicant do it.
So
I
something
don't
to
know the
consider.
answer to that one right now. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. Craig?
Yeah, the language I was trying to use internet notifications, kind of in keeping with what we currently have in the village. There might be some way to localize those, but worst case, if someone gets another alert saying, hey, there's a new CSM for Harvard Drive or Sunset, and it doesn't apply to them, they're just going to delete it. And it's essentially free. I mean, Nixle alerts probably are a penny a piece or something like that. I don't know what our cost is. But yeah, mailings start to get into cost. I will point out that when someone files a CSM today, they have to provide 20 paper copies, I believe, of that CSM. And in the old days, those would be handed out. We would each have a paper copy of those CSMs, and I would show it to my neighbor, and we would be carrying these stacks of paper around the village, and that's all gone. But we still require that of those filers. So updating these ordinances to just acknowledge the internet as a appropriate way to distribute this stuff, seems like a win-win.
And I was just thinking that paper would be to the neighbors, not for the whole village.
Correct. Yeah. But someone still has to lick the stamps and do the mass mailing and figure out that 300-foot radius and what properties are impacted and not. And that's the clerk time where things start to add up a little bit.
Right.
The challenge with the internet notification, I mean, it's a great idea, but there isn't like a consistent saved method that the village utilizes. Nixle's voluntary for sign up. It doesn't include everyone. If there was like a listserv that did notify everyone, that would probably be the easiest and most cost-effective methodology. It's just we don't really have one right now.
I look forward to hearing what the clerk has to say, what's practical.
Yeah, we'll bring that forward at the next meeting. So let's talk about the good neighbor policy, codifying and clarifying the village's good neighborhood or good neighbor policy. Craig, did you want to add some more context to that?
Well, in the one case of the property of trees being clear cut, to me that sounds like work has commenced, and then the good neighbor policy says there's supposed to be a meeting 15 days before work commences. So I wanted to get language in there that says irreversible work. Anything irreversible done is considered commencement of the project. If they want to come in and do surveys or do measurements, soil samples, that sort of stuff, that's all fine. But if they start cutting trees, work has commenced. The good neighbor meeting should take place beforehand. So I wanted to just codify that. And that's what change number 9 is. And then also, again, I mentioned that the good neighbor policy seems to be a voluntary policy. I don't think people have to adhere to it because it's not called for by ordinance. It's just a best practice. I could be wrong. Brian, let me know if it lives somewhere, but I could not find any mention of it in any village ordinance.
It was specifically discouraged, I'll say, by the previous village attorney on the premise that it was not a defensible
policy
thing, I guess. So it was purposely just made a policy, but I'm definitely not an attorney, so I'm not sure that means any hill of beans, but it's definitely not in your code right now. I guess I shut up after that.
Mark, and then Kara.
Yeah, I just think we want to just clarify in my mind, is the issue here one merely of notice and the timing of notice, but not of remedies? In other words, are we satisfied that if the residents had sufficient notice on these types of matters. That all the processes, appeal processes, hearings, whatever else we have is sufficient. And so I just want to clarify that. So if we're all in agreement that the process works, but the problem is it's timing. It's the timing of the notice. Is that where we are? Or does anybody have concerns about the process once that notice is received?
Any quick reactions to that? I'm gonna move to Kara. Craig, did you have a reaction to that, or?
Yeah, well, the good neighbor policy, which is in the meeting packet, it says it's not intended to be a forum to debate the project itself.
Right.
And that's why I talked about the other timing issues, for the CSM, slowing that down a bit, and the public notice, why that's important. By the time the good neighbor announcement comes out, the project is going forward. But that shouldn't be the time that people learn about the project. They should hopefully already be aware of it. That's the goal of the other suggested changes.
Right, but you're saying there that the issue there is timing, but once the notice is given, there are sufficient avenues for residents to express their concerns and to deal with it. So that all we're really talking about is getting that notice to the residents at the, earliest reasonable opportunity. Is that right?
If I could rewrite the whole law, the moment someone has an idea of development, they would have to alert all the neighbors right away and have a meeting to talk about it and see if they get it. But that's not going to happen. Developers, they're going to develop, and there is a process. And once they get approved, they're allowed to do it. They own it. They can tear down the trees. They can build something new. The good neighbor's supposed to be about coordination. I just, in this case, it was very unfortunate that people heard chainsaws the day before they got this notice. And so I just wanted to say that this notice has a 2-week clause in it, or 15 days, I think it is, or 5 days. Yeah, 15 and 5 days are the 2 days that it specifies. And I said no irreversible work should take place before then, just not to surprise those good neighbors. But I would definitely entertain changing this whole thing. The fact that Brian said that this was maybe not legally defensible might be a reason to revisit the whole letter policy.
Thanks, Craig. Kara, did you still have a question, comment?
Nope, John, thanks. I'm okay.
Okay.
In interest of respecting people's time.
Okay, Shabna?
I think Mark is spot on. I think it's if we had to invest energy into anything as a priority, it's notice. Residents do not like surprises, and we've seen this year after year after year on a wide variety of issues. They see people installing speed humps or changing speed humps. There's an outrage. They see no notice regarding the sewers that are being replaced on Tally Ho and the traffic that's going to be rerouted, and there's outrage. So yes, 1,000 yeses, that notice and people knowing in advance what's going on in their neighborhood could solve 50% of the issues, if not more.
We may be able to do some of this to our communications committee as well, going forward. Our newly formed group of experts. Okay. Any other thoughts on the good neighbor policy?
If I can ask,
Go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
The one question I have for Craig is the intent of the notice and the involvement from the neighboring residents to allow individuals an opportunity to object to the project in its design and scope, or is it? I don't, or maybe I'm wording that incorrectly. I just want to understand, because I mean, when you're looking at things from a building perspective or a zoning perspective, I mean, we're not looking at it and saying, wow, a craftsman home just doesn't fit the, you know, the character of this area of the bill, you know, like that piece. And like, so I'm not looking objectively to the eye of residents to think about, I wonder if a modern home fits. You know, it's just specifications of the building project itself. And I'm just curious, are you saying that it's more of, no, we want to have the opportunity to say, I don't feel like this type of home belongs in this, or is it just a review of the scope of the building project itself?
Well, I think I mean, the policy today is very clear. It's about the logistics, you know, the sequence, the hours, the parking issues, erosion issues, who to call if there's an issue, that sort of stuff, and not to debate the project itself. And so I mean, I don't, as I said, if I could erase this and put this letter in, you know, 6 months earlier, that would be great. But, you know, the way it is right now is fine. For what it is, and that's you know, it has no teeth. There's no ability to object. All you can do is try to understand what's about to happen. But in the case of this Columbia property, you know, the chainsaw showed up the day before, I believe, this letter was received by people, and so even though it's supposed to be 15 days before the project, you know, commences. So I just wanted to clarify that language, update the policy a little bit to make it clear that project commencement means irreversible changes to the property.
Okay.
Just so there's no mistakes there. All of the other changes I recommend, you know, are things to increase notification at earlier stages in the project. If there are objections, legitimate objections to a project, because of, you know, a potential mistake or something like that, that should come out before things are approved. I mean, that's the whole idea of the notice. Get it in front of people so they can review it and they can see if it passes muster. And if it doesn't, they should object before the building permit is issued or the Board of Trustees approves the CSM.
The one piece I will add, I believe I don't always send all the notices. I believe the good neighbor notice though is mailed by the resident, not the village for that meeting. It's held on their own time at a time or place of their choosing. So it might be hard to, you know, I think there might be some misconceptions that that's an issued letter from us at the village when it is actually on the resident to coordinate that piece.
It is, yeah.
So we're coming up on time. I think this has been a really good discussion. Craig, I really appreciate you teeing up these issues with a lot of specificity. What I'm hearing from commission members is the Bryans and maybe with my involvement and Craig with your feedback, we're going to be able to come back with some more detail. But to Mark's point, you know, let's face us, let's not try to do everything here. You know, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. There's first things first, I think, that we can do. There'll be things that we decide not to do for whatever reason. I want to have that discussion. There's obviously, you know, some of the technical feasibility issues that the village engineer is going to help us wade through and address and maybe simplify for the commission's consideration. There's some of the legal review and feedback from our new village attorney, bringing them up to speed and getting some feedback on what maybe some of the must-haves are and maybe some of the nice-to-haves are. And then, you know, provide an opportunity for us to kind of sift and winnow through that, come up with a recommendation and determine the level of support at the commission level. And then for the board's consideration moving forward. Does that sound like a kind of a rough framework of a plan for our next meeting and our next discussion? Craig, and then Mark.
So, I mean, it sounds logical and rational. I'm very concerned about time. I don't want to race through changes prematurely. But if there are things that rise to the top that people generally agree on, I would like to get action sooner rather than later on those. Or as the document says, and I think Brian was checking, Brian Mooney was checking on this, is it possible to do a moratorium on accepting CSMs and large scale building permits for a few months to give the commission and the board of trustees, a chance to act. Something tells me that a moratorium is not going to be possible. And so literally, we're in a race with invisible developers who have ideas for exploiting lots in the village that we're not even aware of right now. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. So if there are areas of agreement, I would encourage a swifter motion on those.
Thanks for that, Craig. And Brian, you were waiting for I think some feedback from the attorney, Brian Mooney, on.
That's correct. I have a question on that very matter right now that I am still awaiting a response.
Mark.
Yeah. So I agree with that. We need to prioritize these things. And I think things like notice, to the extent it involves the legal mechanisms, building it into ordinances, that's the slow boat to China. We need to think about things, the staff needs to think about things that practically they can do quickly, that don't require changes in ordinances, in order to provide people more timely notice of these events. And I'll just sort of leave it at that. I don't want to burden the staff by specifying what the time periods are and what the triggers are and so on, but I really encourage the staff to think about that. The second thing I would say, John, is that I think a report should be made to the board at the upcoming meeting about the direction of the Plan Commission on this issue, because there's a lot of public interest. It doesn't always, people don't always focus on the Plan Commission. They focus more on the board. So I think just to get all the board members up to speed as kind of, this is the direction we're sort of heading. And if the board has concerns, wants to focus us in different directions, they have an opportunity to do so before we go too far down any particular road.
That's helpful, Mark. I'll coordinate with Brian on that as well. Other thoughts, Shabna?
It sounds like you guys are looking at notice. I would also agree that a minimum setback is something hopefully we all agree on. It seems like it's a safety concern, whereas maybe FAR has some aesthetic or personal liking. I think safety should be prioritized, and 0 setbacks should not be allowed.
Thanks for that. Okay, any other final comments on this item? This has been a good discussion. I mean, we haven't had kind of a focused discussion on some of these ordinance issues, and obviously it's going to require some good work on the short term and the medium term and probably the long term as we move forward. And I look forward to engaging with the commission on doing that. Are we ready to move on? Kara?
Sorry, that was an accident.
No worries. No worries. All right. Well, as I said, that was a good discussion. Item 6, future agenda items. They're listed. Mark, you mentioned ADUs earlier. We haven't had an update on the soil on the U-Bay fields. Wimmer's doing some things. Fence code, Locust Drive multi-use path. That's really tied back to the Safe Streets funding. That may be back in play, which would be great news if it is. Anything else that folks want to add for a future agenda item? I think we have a pretty big agenda in front of us now. Thanks, Craig. No, I'm just kidding. It's really helpful, the good work that you're doing. Any other future agenda items folks want to add to the list? Okay. Let me know or let Brian know otherwise. Our next tentative meeting date is Tuesday, July 8th. Brian Mooney, anything else from your perspective?
Not immediately that comes to mind, other than Tuesday the 8th. I believe I'm flying back from California, so I'll keep you posted on my availability that day.
Okay, all right, so we'll plan accordingly. Brian Berquist, thanks for hanging out with us. Great, the context and the technical perspective and stuff you were able to walk the commission through, I thought was really, really helpful and generated some really good thoughts and recommendations. So I appreciate that as always. Otherwise, I ask for a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? Thank you, Craig. All those in favor? Great to see you. David Sykes, appreciate your good work. And we'll be in touch moving forward.
Everyone.
Good night, everyone.